Good afternoon, I'm Dennis Vittorian and this is the 25th hour. In this week's news for the week of November 1st, Joe Biden is the 46th President of the United States. Demonstrations have turned into celebrations in New York City, and anxiety still remains in the air for state politicians as absentee ballots start being counted in New York next week. Things may have changed by the time you hear this. Starting with Mayor de Blasio. Mayor de Blasio said on Tuesday that if Biden is elected president, New Yorkers should expect a stimulus deal that allows the city to get back on its feet and lower a spike in murders and other crimes. In the run-up to the election, it was taking days for the absentee ballot tracker to update, causing a lot of anxiety. The Wall Street Journal reported that the pandemic has driven Democratic city residents to the suburbs, supplanting the Republicans traditionally living there. We reported last time that de Blasio entered a deal with the largest municipal union to stave off layoffs in exchange for not having to pay into union funds. The publication The City reported that de Blasio also agreed to support a state bill that would create early retirement incentives that could affect 75,000 union members. Staten Island keeps seeing spikes in coronavirus infection numbers, with 2 zip codes surpassing 3% positive test rates. New York City hospitals have seen an increase of COVID patients by 62% in October. The NYPD, raising alarms of possible election night violence, had drawn up plans to limit car and pedestrian traffic in Manhattan to prevent unrest. On election night, no unrest came to pass, but demonstrations started up the next day, including a rally at Stonewall Inn in Greenwich Village, encouraging poll workers to continue counting votes.
Every vote counts. Count every vote. That's the phrase echoing along Fifth Avenue right now. We're almost to Washington Square Park. I want to take you up top to Chopper 4. Take a look down from the sky. What began as a few people gathered on the steps of the public library has grown to more than 1,000 folks marching together with one voice. This is a peaceful, organized demonstration. The march heading to Washington Square. You can see the arch just down Fifth right there as they make their way down. It has been peaceful. It has been organized. The streets have been blocked off. Folks have been giving out water. People of all backgrounds joining together, again, with one message. They want to see every vote counted. And that's what folks are doing right here, joining together along this march on Fifth Avenue. Police are here, NYPD's out here. They've been walking along the entire time, but we've had no issues. We've not seen any issues. There have been no problems. Again, this is a very peaceful, organized march that's expected to wrap up here at Washington Square Park. This is one of several demonstrations planned for tonight and the next couple of days. We're live in the Village. I'm Mark Santia, News 4 New York.
Police with bikes confronted marching protesters, pulling off a tactic called kettling, bottling protesters into a confined area and simultaneously told to disperse despite not being able to. Despite videos of cops kettling protesters, Chief of Patrol Juanita Holmes claimed the police never employed the tactic. De Blasio was pressed about this on the Brian Lehrer show, with the mayor saying that the pictures and videos don't tell the whole story. Public advocate Jumaane Williams was present during the demonstrations and was shoved by police while trying to defuse tensions. Police themselves were assaulted by a handful of protesters, with one video showing a woman spitting in a cop's face before being manhandled and arrested.
Public advocate Jumaane Williams, one of dozens of protesters pushed and shoved by bike cops policing this Thursday night demonstration. It began near the Stonewall Inn and meandered to Union Square. Much of the time, police officers and protesters jousting with each other over access to the street. Williams called the police tactics overly aggressive.
The aggression always seems to be much more than needs to be at any moment in time. And that's a valid question to be asking why.
But the NYPD says the use of force you see on videos like this only happens after protesters try to collectively block cops from arresting specific individuals.
When somebody throws a rock, throws a bottle, defies a lawful order, and police move in to arrest that person fights the arrest. At that point, a number of people emerge and try to pull the person that is the subject of the arrest back into the crowd and end up physically struggling with police. It's being exploited by creating videos that are then labeled about police attacking peaceful protesters.
At the Thursday night demonstration, police arrested about 10 protesters. The NYPD tweeted pictures of a pocket knife they found on one demonstrator and a chain they say one protester pressed against an officer's throat.
Who brings a knife and a hammer and flammable liquids when they in fact start fires to a peaceful protest?
The head of de Blasio Center for Faith and Community Partnership said that police urged religious leaders to stay off the streets for election demonstrations, with clergy not taking too kindly to the ask. 16,000 students were referred for testing to determine learning disabilities, a drop from 22,000 last year, spurring concerns that special needs kids are falling through the cracks because of the pandemic. Suspensions also dropped 44.5%, due largely in part because of remote learning. More parents are pulling their children out of New York City public schools and moving them into private schools for the in-person smaller class sizes, according to the Wall Street Journal. Meanwhile, Success Academy, the city's largest charter school, said it was extending its all-remote learning to March of next year. New York City's contact tracing program is called into question this week as well, as reporting by Chalkbeat revealed a Brooklyn student's COVID infection was reported late by 10 days, leaving the community in the dark. Last June, de Blasio announced the Better Buses Restart program, seeking to create 9 bus lanes to service additional New Yorkers throughout the 5 boroughs. The 181st Street bus lane in Manhattan was set to be completed this year, but the Department of Transportation shot down those plans and in effect the Restart program for now. Meanwhile, newly installed Transportation Commissioner Kim Royster had her first interview since starting the job, notably pushing hard against the idea of bike riders getting licensed. The Brooklyn paper reported on the 4th Avenue bike lanes that were recently completed around Grand Army Plaza, connecting central Brooklyn to East River crossings with a focus on how dangerous it is still for cyclists in the city. And in the Bronx, Community Board 5 approved a $10 million revitalization project dubbed the Aqueduct Study to improve a stretch of land called the Aqueduct Walk between Morton Place and 180th Street. Complaints of homeless camps, trash, drugs, and Americans with Disabilities Act violations led to the approval of this 2-year study. Moving on to the City Council. Richie Torres, the Bronx City Councilman, became one of the first gay black members of Congress after winning his election on Tuesday. Mondaire Jones became the second after winning an election to replace outgoing Congresswoman Nita Lowey in the 17th District encompassing Rockland and Westchester counties. Mayor de Blasio confirmed that a special election to replace outgoing Queens Councilman Rory Lansman is set for February 2nd of next year. Lansman is moving on to the Cuomo administration, serving as special counsel for ratepayer protection, dealing with utility companies' billing on New Yorkers. Moving on to Governor Cuomo. Governor Cuomo and State Attorney General Letitia James expressed concerns on Sunday that people of color won't get the same access to the corona vaccine as plans involve distributing the vaccine to CVS's and Walgreens. More than 60% of the 94,000 applicants requesting rent relief from the state were rejected, with less than half of the funds being sent out. State Comptroller Thomas DiNapoli said New York's tax revenue dropped $4 billion this year compared to the last fiscal year. Positive testing rates continue to climb upward in some areas of the state, with Long Island seeing an increase. Nassau County saw 216 new cases on Thursday, with Long Island reaching a 2% positive rate overall. Cuomo said that he'll ease restrictions in some New York hotspots as those areas are doing better. South Brooklyn will be allowed to open their non-essential businesses, but only to 50% capacity. Meanwhile, Cuomo increased law enforcement presence at coronavirus checkpoints in New York's airports and will be employing his microcluster strategy after all to stave off increasing infections. More than 2.5 million New Yorkers voted early before Election Day, according to the State Board of Elections. State of Politics reports that according to the State Board of Elections, more New Yorkers opted out of registering for any party than joining the Republican Party in the state. Attorney General James launched an investigation on robocalls that told voters either incorrect electoral information or cautioned them not to go because of some ominous threat. The Times-Union reported that before State BOE Commissioner Gregory Peterson resigned, he may have been outed for a conflict of interest for holding a position as vice chair of the Nassau County Republican Party, a group that's regulated by the Board of Elections. The Working Families Party managed to secure their survival after a change in election law mandated that political parties get 130,000 votes or 2% of the total ballots cast in the election, after more than 262,000 voters chose someone on their party line. Cuomo directed his ire about New York potentially losing a congressional seat in Long Island on Mayor de Blasio. Cuomo once again said he wasn't going to take a position on Biden's cabinet, instead committing to serve out his term as New York's governor. The New York State Education Department canceled the January high school Regents exam, saying that the state can't safely or fairly institute the test with the pandemic still around. Subway ridership, despite ticking up because people are used to the pandemic lifestyle, is still down 70% from the start of the pandemic. On Thursday, an overnight derailment in the city's subway system on the N train line near Atlantic Avenue led to delays in various subway lines, most in South Brooklyn, destroying morning commutes. There were no injuries. In Mount Vernon, a police officer named John Campbell was suspended for discussing protecting drugs for a suspected drug dealer, caught in a secret recording by a whistleblower inside the police department. In Southampton, the Shinnecock Indian Nation started camping out in the outskirts of town to protest their treatment by New York State, chiefly the state's opposition to the tribe having its own electronic ad tower, meant for revenue to support medical and daycare safety. In Erie County, the legislature unanimously passed a resolution wanting the county to publicly release information on nursing home COVID deaths and cases, a topic dogging the governor because of his controversial health department guidelines in the beginning of the pandemic that kept nursing home residents away from hospitals if they had COVID. Rochester's investigation into how City Hall handled the Daniel Prude case will wrap up, release a report in about 2 months, aiming to bring some recommendations of reform. Prude was killed in March when he was having a mental health episode while high on PCP, and cops restrained him and put a spit bag over his head, choking him. In Albany, Democrats in state elections didn't fare as well as expected, much like Democrats across the nation. Instead of a supermajority in the state Senate, it looks like Republicans will maintain the 8 seats Democrats were looking forward to flip, with Democrats needing just 2 of those seats to capture a veto-proof majority in the chamber. Democrats already hold 2/3 of the assembly. In Bay Ridge, first-term state Senator Andrew Gennardis is fighting to rally in front of Republican Vito Bruno. On the Upper East Side, Republican Lou Paliafito lost to Assemblywoman Rebecca Seawright even after she was kicked off her ballot lines. In Coney Island's 46th Assembly District, Republican and self-professed QAnon supporter Mike Shushkowitz is running ahead of Democrat incumbent Matilda Frontis by close to 3,000 votes before absentee ballots are counted. Western New York Democrats fared better than Dems in other regions in the state as they scored Senate victories. New York Republicans said the key to their success was bail reform passed by Democrats last year, resonating with voters that thought it created more danger to the public. A lot of races are expected to go into overtime essentially because the huge amount of absentee ballots yet to be counted might flip the results. In the state courts, the first jury trial took place in Queens in its criminal court for the first time since March 16th. There was a jury trial set to take place in the Bronx, but it was canceled after an interpreter and 3 court officers tested positive for COVID. NYCHA's experience with lead in its apartments continues as a new lawsuit filed in Manhattan Supreme Court puts the agency in the hot seat again after assurances lead was being taken out of apartments, especially those with small children. Yanira Alameda sued NYCHA after her 7-year-old autistic son's blood allegedly tested positive for triple the allowable lead level. The New York State court system had to cut more than 40 judges due to the pandemic budget cuts, opting to retire the oldest judges on the bench. On Thursday, several appellate judges sued court officials for firing them without any due process and taking part in age discrimination. State Attorney General Letitia James filed a lawsuit in Manhattan Supreme Court against the art auction house Sotheby's for allegedly allowing an art collector to avoid sales tax on $27 million worth of art from 2010 to 2015. Moving on to Trump. Joe Biden is projected to be the 46th president of the United States, and Kamala Harris is projected to be the first Black Asian female vice president in history, according to multiple news sources, including Fox News. Election night became election week for the most part, as the pandemic caused record absentee ballots and early voting threw things completely off kilter. Despite months of polls showing Biden in the lead and even beating Trump in a blowout, initial election night returns actually gave Trump a lot of strength, still winning Texas and Florida despite Democratic hopes of winning those Republican strongholds. But some states were surprises, like Arizona. The AP called the state for Biden early on, including Fox News, that severely angered the Trump campaign, which had a war room inside the White House, once again mixing the official with the campaign. The campaign's decision to hold a war room inside the White House is being investigated now by the Office of Special Counsel for the Election Law Violations. By the end of election night, America still did not know who their next president was going to be, but it was clear that the race was down to 6 states: Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia, and Nevada. It was also clear that after half a year of America under a pandemic, a record number of voters were going to vote through the mail, and Trump consistently refused to support that idea, leading to what experts called a red mirage, followed by a blue tide. Republicans would come out to vote in person, but the ocean of Democratic mail-in ballots would change who had the lead in the states. Biden came out after midnight to tell his supporters to remain patient, while Trump came out after 2 in the morning to claim victory despite millions of ballots yet to be counted.
We feel good about where we are. We really do. I'm here to tell you tonight, we believe we're on track to win this election. We knew because of the unprecedented early vote and the mail-in vote that it's going to take a while. We're going to have to be patient until the hard work of tallying the votes is finished. And it ain't over till every vote is counted, every ballot is counted.
We were getting ready to win this election. Frankly, we did win this election. We did win this election. So our goal now is to ensure the integrity for the good of this nation. This is a very big moment. This is a major fraud in our nation. We want the law to be used in a proper manner. So we'll be going to the U.S. Supreme Court. We want all voting to stop. We don't want them to find any ballots at 4 o'clock in the morning and add them to the list, okay?
As the hours went by and Michigan and Wisconsin went to Biden, Trump launched a legal blitz in the states to stop counting votes and claimed fraud without evidence. His lawsuits in those states were subsequently dismissed. On Friday morning, vote counts flipped Trump's leads in Georgia and Pennsylvania to Biden's direction. Trump gave a speech where he continued to claim he won, quote, if you count the legal votes, end quote. Biden gave a speech on Friday night by saying that the way the numbers are going, quote, we're winning, end quote, and urged calm.
And we're reminded again of the severity of this pandemic Cases are on the rise nationwide, and we're nearing 240,000 deaths due to COVID. And our hearts go out to each and every family that has lost a loved one to this terrible disease. In America, the vote is sacred. It's how people of this nation express their will. And it is the will of the voters, no one, not anything else, that chooses the President of the United States of America. So, each ballot must be counted. And that's what we're going to see going through now. And that's how it should be. Democracy is sometimes messy. It sometimes requires a little patience as well. But that patience has been rewarded now for more than 240 years with a system of governance that's been the envy of the world. And we continue to feel, Senator and I, we continue to feel very good about where things stand. We have no doubt that when the count is finished, Senator Harris and I will be declared the winners. So I ask everyone to stay calm, all the people to stay calm. The process is working. The count is being completed, and we'll know very soon. So thank you all for your patience, but we have to count the votes. God bless you all, and may God protect our troops. Thank you so much.
Good evening. I'd like to provide the American people with an update on our efforts to protect the integrity of our very important 2020 election. If you count the legal votes, I easily win. If you count the illegal votes, they can try to steal the election from us. If you count the votes that came in late, we're looking at them very strongly, but a lot of votes came in late. I've already decisively won many critical states, including massive victories in Florida, Iowa, Indiana, Ohio. To name just a few, we won these and many other victories despite historic election interference from big media, big money, and big tech. As everybody saw, we won by historic numbers. And the pollsters got it knowingly wrong. They got it knowingly wrong. We had polls that were so ridiculous, and everybody knew it at the time. There was no blue wave that they predicted. They thought there was going to be a big blue wave. That was false. That was done for suppression reasons. But instead, there was a big red wave. And it's been properly acknowledged, actually, by the media. They were, I think, very impressed. But that was after the fact. That doesn't do us any good. But there's been a lot of shenanigans, and we can't stand for that in our country. Thank you very much.
Protesters on both sides of the divide came out to show their support for their presidential candidate. In New York, as mentioned earlier, demonstrators came out to support the continued counting of ballots in the face of the president calling to stop counting the vote. In certain battleground states, the president's supporters either called to stop counting the vote or to keep counting, depending on what would give the president more of an edge. Facebook had to take action in removing a group called Stop the Steal, which sought to send more than 360,000 supporters targeting vote counting centers after the organized effort saw people trying to break into those centers, especially in open carry states. The Justice Department told federal prosecutors in an email on Wednesday that armed federal agents are allowed in ballot counting venues. Police in Philadelphia are investigating a bomb threat against the vote counting center there, arresting 2 men from Virginia on firearms charges, but not finding any bombs. After every major media outlet called the race for Biden and Harris, the president and vice president-elect made speeches remarking on the historic firsts and promising to unify the country.
You chose hope and unity, decency, science, and yes, truth.
And to make progress, we have to stop treating our opponents as our enemies. They are not our enemies. They are Americans. They're Americans.
And to the woman most responsible for my presence here today, my mother, Kamala Harris, who is always in our hearts. When she came here from India at the age of 19, she maybe didn't quite imagine this moment. But she believed so deeply in an America where a moment like this is possible. And so I am thinking about her and about the generations of women, Black women, Asian, white, Latina, Native American women, who throughout our nation's history have paved the way for this moment tonight. But while I may be the first woman in this office, I will not be the last. Because every little girl watching tonight sees that this is a country of possibilities. And to the children of our country, regardless of your gender, our country has sent you a clear message. Dream with ambition, lead with conviction, and see yourselves in a way that others may not, simply because they've never seen it before.
For all those of you who voted for President Trump, I understand the disappointment tonight. I've lost a couple times myself, but now, let's give each other a chance. The refusal of Democrats and Republicans to cooperate with one another, it's not some mysterious force beyond our control. It's a decision, a choice we make. And if we can decide not to cooperate, then we can decide to cooperate. Too many dreams have been deferred for too long. We must make the promise of the country real for everybody, no matter their race, their ethnicity, their faith, their identity, or their disability. Let us be the nation that we know we can be, a nation united, a nation strengthened, a nation healed. The United States of America, ladies and gentlemen, there's never been anything we've tried we've not been able to do. So remember, as my grandpapa, our grandpapa used to say when I walked out of his home when I was a kid up in Scranton, he said, "Joey, keep the faith." And our grandmother, when she was alive, she yelled, "No, Joey, spread it. Spread the faith. God love you all. May God bless America, and may God protect our troops."
President Trump has not conceded as of the time of this recording and has vowed to keep pursuing his legal avenues in court. Considering the balance of the Senate is a toss-up with 2 runoff elections in Georgia deciding the fate of the chamber in the beginning of next January, Biden's options are limited in what he can pass. His first plan of action, though, is to reverse a series of executive orders signed by Trump and initiating agency proceedings reversing certain regulations. Biden's transition is putting together a new coronavirus task force, and Biden is aiming to rejoin the Paris Climate Agreement, reverse the Trump Muslim travel ban, reinstitute DACA, and rejoin the World Health Organization. Trump hinted that he might fire Dr. Anthony Fauci after the election.
Don't tell anybody, but let me wait till a little bit after the election. I appreciate the advice. I appreciate it. No, he's been wrong on a lot.
The head of Trump's COVID task force, Deborah Birx, took a forceful position counter to the administration this week when she said that the U.S. is entering the most concerning and most deadly phase of this pandemic and urging much more aggressive action. Despite the nation's attention focusing on the country continues to reach record-high numbers of COVID cases. On Friday, NBC News reported that Trump's chief of staff, Mark Meadows, tested positive for COVID. Videos can be seen of Mark Meadows walking around with Trump, his children, and other people not wearing masks in various campaign-related events. The weekly labor report this time around showed that 751,000 jobless benefits were claimed, with the number of those receiving unemployment declining to 7.3 million. While they are modest declines, it's still way higher than where we were at the beginning of the pandemic. 363,000 applied for unemployment aid for the first time. The U.S. added 638,000 jobs in October, and the unemployment rate fell to 6.9%. The U.S. is now officially out of the Paris Climate Accords for now. That's the international agreement signed by 197 countries to reduce emissions to stave off worsening climate change. Trump took the U.S. out of the agreement in 2017, but UN rules prevented official departure until now. Trump's administration fired the deputy administrator for the U.S. Agency for International Development, Bonnie Glick, denying her the chance to take over the department after the agency's acting administrator, John Barsa, was told his appointment was expiring after Friday due to his acting status. Those that are not confirmed by the Senate are deemed acting heads of agencies and are only allowed to serve for a limited time. Jared Kushner's management company, Westminster, filed eviction papers in court jurisdictions where they own apartment buildings, moving to push tenants out who are past due on their rent despite eviction moratoriums. Last week, we mentioned how if Trump won a second term, sources said that Defense Secretary Mark Esper was one of the people on the chopping block. More reporting came out that showed Esper had his resignation letter prepared and ready for the president's signature, with some saying it's a totally normal move for presidents who are starting a new term that want a new cabinet to be presented with resignation letters from their cabinet officials. Steve Bannon, Trump's former campaign manager and chief strategist, called for the beheading of Dr. Anthony Fauci and FBI Director Christopher Wray this week on a radio show, leading to his lawyers withdrawing from representing him in a case where he allegedly defrauded donors in a Build the Wall scheme.
Now, we can't really have Thanksgiving because Fauci, who his last day should be today, President Donald J. Trump. Now, I actually want to go a step farther, but I realize the president is a kind-hearted man and a good man. I'd actually like to go back to the old times of Tudor England. I'd put the heads on pikes, right? I'd put them at the two corners of the White House as a warning to federal bureaucrats. You either get with the program or you're gone. Time to stop playing games. Blow it all out. Put Rick Grinnell today as the interim head of the FBI. That'll light him up, right?
You know what, Steve? Just yesterday there was the anniversary of the hanging of two Tories in Philadelphia. These were Quaker businessmen who had cohabitated, if you will, with the British while they were occupying Philadelphia. These people were hung. This is what we used to do to traitors.
That's how you won the revolution. Nobody wants to talk about it. Revolution wasn't some sort of garden party, right? It was not. It was a civil war.
Moving on to Congress. Polls before the election projected that there would be a blue wave, more or less, with Democrats picking up House seats and overturning Republican control of the Senate. The results couldn't be further from predictions, as Democrats actually lost seats in the House despite still retaining control, and Senate control came down to the wire in Georgia, with both Senate seats going to runoffs in January. In Long Island, Republicans are set to hold on to both seats. In Staten Island, Republican Assemblywoman Nicole Maliotakis declared victory against incumbent Democrat Max Rose. In New York's 19th congressional district covering the Catskills and the Mid-Hudson Valley, Democrat Antonio Delgado claimed victory, while the Republican opponent Kyle Vandewater hadn't conceded yet. It was predicted that Senator Susan Collins of Maine was going to lose too, but that didn't come to pass as she beat Democratic challenger Sarah Gideon. In Arizona, though, Mark Keller, the astronaut husband to Gabby Giffords, the former representative that survived a gunshot to the head in 2011, beat Martha McSally to serve out the remainder of the seat's term for 2 years. The Pentagon notified both chambers of Congress that Trump's administration is moving forward on a planned $10 billion sale of defense equipment to the United Arab Emirates. In the House, Rep. Nydia Velázquez, joined by Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, called on NYCHA to conduct air quality tests, part of a concern that old ventilation systems are helping spread coronavirus throughout public housing projects. The House Democrats will choose their next leader on November 18 and 19, while Republicans do it a bit earlier on the 17th. Pelosi and McCarthy are expected to retain their respective positions. And then in Senate, after two failed attempts at passing skinny COVID relief bills, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, fresh off his own electoral victory, called for a coronavirus package to be passed before the end of the year. He also said that during Trump's lame duck period, which is the period between his loss and Biden's inauguration, McConnell will still be confirming Trump's judges. Moving on to the judicial branch, Judge Emmett Sullivan directed Postmaster Louis DeJoy to deliver mail-in ballots before November 3rd, even if they're not postmarked. 92 million Americans have already voted, but 300,000 mail-ins still missed Election Day deadlines. Judge Sullivan then ordered DeJoy and the USPS to search for misplaced absentee ballots in 15 states, and the USPS said it wasn't going to comply with the order. It took another day for Sullivan to then order the USPS to do twice daily sweeps of its mail sorting facilities to find the missing ballots, giving a deadline for Friday afternoon. After delivering almost 200,000 ballots, Sullivan ordered another conference on Monday. The only election-related lawsuit out of the few which Trump's legal team launched with allegations of fraud that reached any appellate-level jurist is one out of Pennsylvania, where the state GOP sued to make sure the state is setting aside late absentee ballots in case future litigation renders them void. In order to make sure a prior order setting aside those ballots was complied with, Supreme Court Justice Samuel Alito, a conservative member of the court, granted a request to allow for more oversight to make sure the ballots were being set aside, but rejecting a request to stop counting those ballots altogether. The state election workers were already sequestering mail-in ballots, and it's not clear why Justice Alito wanted more oversight on something already complied with, as per the older order. Alito referred the case to the entire Supreme Court. No indication yet on when the Supreme Court would make the decision to take up the case. The court voted 4-4 before on Pennsylvania mail-in ballots, leaving a Pennsylvania Supreme Court's decision to stand on letting late mail-in ballots count as long as they're postmarked by Election Day. Here are the other election-related lawsuits Trump has filed. In Pennsylvania, Trump sued the Pennsylvania Secretary of State Kathy Boockvar and the county boards of elections to set aside ballots that came in between November 9th to 12th that had missing proofs of identification. The judge in that case granted temporary relief to Trump by having Boockvar set aside ballots that came in between November 10 to 12 with missing proofs of ID. Another lawsuit also targeted provisional ballots, which are ballots with questionable validity due to the voters' eligibility to vote. A judge ordered to set those ballots aside as well. A third lawsuit in Pennsylvania was dismissed for lacking merit when Republican candidates targeted ballots that voters had a chance to cure or fix. A fourth Pennsylvania lawsuit was settled to allow for more Republican observers of the vote count after a Republican complaint was filed. The last lawsuit in Pennsylvania had to do with how far away Republican observers were allowed to witness vote counting, with the Pennsylvania Appellate Court reversing an initial dismissal on the trial level and allowing for observers to be 6 feet away. In Arizona, a hearing is scheduled on a case regarding whether election officials got ballots rejected by telling voters to choose a button on machines meant to just override rejections. In Michigan, Trump sued again to allow for more observers, but the judge dismissed the claim because, quote, the essence of the count is completed and the relief is completely unavailable, end quote. In Georgia, an allegation from a Republican observer that late ballots were added to a pile of on-time ballots was dismissed as hearsay, and that there was no evidence of the claim. In Nevada, 2 Republican candidates for office made vague allegations of irregularities. The judge dismissed the case for failing to produce evidence of wrongdoing, but promised to take another look if there was something to the case. All in all of the lawsuits that Trump has filed wouldn't even move the needle if it came to reversing a number of ballots that came through. At the most, it would be numbering in the hundreds, and it's not enough to overturn any lead that Biden has. Lawyers for state and local governments announced that a settlement with Johnson & Johnson and 3 other major pharmaceutical companies over the opioid epidemic has increased to $26 billion. The money will go to paying for treatment and prevention programs in communities that saw the worst of the epidemic that led to hundreds of thousands of Americans overdosing from overprescribed opiates. Washington District Judge James Boasberg ruled against the federal government in his decision to reveal the names and dollar amounts for everyone that applied and received loans from the Paycheck Protection Program, one of the COVID relief programs aimed at propping up businesses by helping them pay their payroll. The program is under fire for basically giving out money to whoever applied without checking to make sure there was no fraud going on. An Illinois federal judge, Gary Feinerman, blocked Trump's public charge rule this week, which sought to prevent residency to migrants who will end up using the welfare system. The policy has seen its share of legal rulings, but this latest ruling made the head of the Citizenship and Immigration Services to announce the rule's nationwide blockage. In national news, Edward Snowden, the former NSA contractor who leaked classified documents revealing U.S. surveillance tactics and fled to Russia in 2013, applied for a Russian passport. Younger corona patients who recovered from the virus in 2 weeks are suffering from more long-term effects, and doctors are only now starting to explore what they call post-acute COVID. The nation reached the record 100,000 cases in one day on Wednesday as cases continue to rise, news that was briefly overshadowed because of the election. The days after that saw more records broken, with the number of cases rising above 100,000 each time. 121,000 on Thursday, 132,700 on Friday. Reporting by Sarah Cliff and Jessica Silver Greenberg revealed that hospitals that are trying to make up for revenue shortfalls during the pandemic have attached surprise COVID fees on patients' hospital stays, billing them for PPE and sanitation. The reporting spurred investigations by various state attorneys general. Aside from public office, voters around the nation also voted for various ballot initiatives. In California, voters chose to exempt Uber, Lyft, DoorDash, Postmates, and Instacart drivers to be counted as employees under state law, preventing gig workers from receiving traditional employee benefits. In New Jersey, recreational marijuana was legalized by voters, a measure set to go into effect in a year, a response to drug-related arrests in minority communities. Oregon decriminalized all street drugs altogether, including cocaine and heroin, opting to fine those carrying small amounts of drugs $100 or get a referral to an addiction recovery center. Despite Florida breaking Democrats' hearts, it did approve a $15 minimum wage. After all is said and done, all eyes will once again fall upon the polling industry for missing the mark yet again. After trauma with the 2016 poll numbers being wrong, the industry sought to correct mistakes by looking at state polling more closely, but yet again missed huge predictions, claiming Florida would flip blue or that Wisconsin would be a Democratic landslide as some examples, but being utterly wrong yet again. Now, just to be clear, the 2016 polls predicted the popular vote more or less accurately, but when it comes to the electoral college votes, it seems like the polls once again this year were off the mark in terms of predicting the future electoral college spread. Another hurricane formed in the Caribbean named Eta, wrecking Nicaragua and Honduras and leaving 150 dead in Guatemala as a Category 4, before charting course to Florida as a tropical storm, which is expected to land there late Sunday. South Florida was issued a storm advisory on Friday night. The 4 police officers involved in the killing of George Floyd, Derek Chauvin, Alexander Kung, Thomas Lane, and Tao Tao, will be receiving a joint trial rather than being tried separately, with the judge rejecting defense lawyers' requests for the separate trials. Defense lawyers usually ask for separate trials to make sure defendants aren't forced to incriminate each other. And that's it for this week's show on the 25th hour. Please rate, review, and share this podcast with your friends. Make sure that you sign up on our Facebook page and Instagram to receive the latest updates and the latest episodes as soon as they come out. Don't forget to become a patron at patreon.com/the25thhournews. As always, you can send us tips and suggestions at the25thhour@gmail.com. Thank you, everybody, and have a great rest of the weekend.